Welcome to Financial Tides podcast. Today's topic is going to be paralysis analysis or analysis paralysis, however you want to say it. It deals with the inability to make a decision. So, Taylor, why don't you kick us off with
Yeah. So,
defining?
so first, before we get started, why don't you define analysis paralysis for us? What is that? I think some people have probably heard of it, but I don't think everyone knows exactly what it is or where it shows up.
Yeah, just like it sounds, it's the inability to make a decision because of either too much information or you don't think you have enough information. And so all the sales training I had years ago in the life insurance business was about, finding the right information to give people so they aren't overwhelmed by it. And then some people are underwhelmed because they're saying, I can't decide until I understand it more thoroughly. And then so they either seek more or have too much on their table.
Yeah, and it really comes from that paradox of choice that was coined by the psychologist Barry Schwartz. Basically saying that you may get better results from having all these different increases of choices and having a bigger selection. But the problem with it is it creates a lot more anxiety and decision and overall dissatisfaction at the end of the day. Even though you might have a better outcome, it just gets really overwhelming to have all these different choices. So.
We talked about this and we had three causes of paralysis analysis. Give the first two and I'll do the third one.
Yeah, so the first one's just overall anxiety in general. I think that we live in an anxious world, and money is one of the biggest things that can cause anxiety. I think everyone looks at their accounts and they feel anxious and they know that this is what they're using to live, and money isn't the root of all happiness, but it's definitely something that if you don't have enough of it can cause quite a bit of stress. So I think just overall anxiety with money is the first one. And then second one is just a fear of making a mistake. Nobody wants to make a mistake. Everyone wants to be perfect. And even if you're not trying to be perfect, you don't want to be that person that makes the mistake and does something wrong. So you kind of get too much in your own head as a result of it.
Yeah, and the third one is a version of FOMO, and anybody that's known us for years here's FOMO, FOMO, fear of missing out. So that goes both ways, right? A lot of people come in with FOMO because I got to get a hold of XYZ company. The stock is doing so well, I'm missing out on it, or I got to have Bitcoin or some crazy idea that they're missing out on. The other FOMO is I'm not going to make a decision. I'm going to go into analysis mode because I might be missing out on something else that's out there that I don't even understand or know about yet that it even exists. And that's worse because there's no ever solution for that, right? You could be missing out on something that's out there, and until I mean, there's an infinite number of decades and centuries before we figure out everything that's out there, right? So that's the FOMO that's the most dangerous when it comes to paralysis analysis.
Yeah, and then how is it displayed in our world? Like, where do we see it most often, and how do we channel in when we're talking with someone and recognize that they're kind of going through this analysis paralysis cycle?
Usually, what happens is we get to a point where we've laid out choices with pros and cons and trade-offs. And then we get to the end and it becomes, well, what else is there? And I said, well, that was it. There's still other things that are out there, but they don't apply to you. You don't have the income for it, or you have too much income for it. So we can throw those other ones all out and stick to what's available. And those three choices, we think option three was the best. But all three work for you as long as you have the trade-offs. And then you still get well, I better analyze all three of those a little more detail. And in reality is a lot of times that's just a natural objection to I'm not confident in myself. I'm not confident in you. I'm not confident in the recommendations, those choices, that insurance company, that investment company. So those are some of the obstacles. And some people are more naturally um, um, designed for analysis paralysis. And then we have others that just come back and say, whichever one you say, let's do it. Where do I sign? And that always makes our day. But we're okay with the battle of paralysis analysis. That's why we set this podcast up to make sure people understood that it's something they need to overcome if they're going to find success.
Yeah, so I think what I heard you say in there is that when we see someone that has an inability to execute a recommendation, we make a clear recommendation, set out a clear plan for them, and that they just aren't able to proceed with it for whatever reason. That's one of them. And then the other one was proceeding with no strategy, saying, hey, you know what, I'm just going to keep things how they are. I'm not going to make any changes even though there might be a better solution out there. So people kind of seek that perfect outcome, trying to find the exact right one instead of saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to take one step to get better. Is this situation, is this proposal or recommendation better than what my current situation is? If so, I should act on it, even if it's not the perfect solution. And we can just keep trying to get 1% better every day and every time we make an adjustment.
No doubt. And so the outcomes of analysis paralysis are what?
Yeah, they're staying the course of worse outcomes because it's easier than making an actual decision. So when you get overwhelmed by having all these choices or having to make a change and you go into that cycle, then you just decide, hey, you know what? If I just keep out everything how they are, how it is has been working. It's not, maybe it's not perfect, but I know what it is and I know how it goes. And instead of trying to learn this new thing and understand this new thing because it's so overwhelming, I'm just going to do nothing. I'm not going to make the change because it's a lot harder. And I think it leads to a lot of missed opportunities. Whereas you could have been getting 1% better, 5% better from where you were at, you decide because it wasn't the perfect solution or it's a lot of work to try to figure it out, learn it, and understand it enough for you to feel comfortable with it, that you just decide, you know what, I'll just keep things how I know them and how I feel comfortable with. So I don't really care if I miss that opportunity.
Yeah. And I think that's a good chance to talk about that, the herd mentality and that, the move toward the masses, right? And so, people will start researching their options. And then if most people are doing what one of the options is, that feels better, right? It feels good to go with the herd. And, Buffett always said, it's easy to swim, down river with the tide, with the river flow. He said it's hard to swim upstream against the river. And he said, but he's always had a personal attitude that you do better swimming against the river. And that's the contrarian approach, right? It doesn't always have to be that way, but it's just so easy to get caught up in herd mentality when you have a hard time making decisions and trusting. Um,
So, John, tie it all back together now. So, why does this matter for us? Why does it matter for our investors? Why does it matter in general?
Because usually when there's a need for a recommendation, there's a need to take some form of action. Not the need to do what you said earlier, which is people say, I'll do nothing and I'll just wait. So if somebody's getting older and they know it's time to buy long-term care insurance and they're in good health, waiting's a problem, right? Because now their illness could pop up. They're going to get older, so the benefits are less valuable. The premiums could be higher. I think you wrote in a narrative that we were talking about that if you're under a mortar attack, you need to move. It doesn't matter which direction you need to go in. The mortars are coming to where you're standing, go left or right. Even if you go left and there's a mortar there, at least you moved because you knew one was coming where you're at. So you got to make the move. And then, there's so much information out there. It's the wonderful world of overkill of information that's easy to get overwhelmed. And I always use the example that, I'm doing this 60 plus hours a week. You're doing it 60 hours a week. We've got Amanda, Bob, and then we go out to these lunches with these advisors. They're all doing it 60 hours a week, and we share information, all of us. So by the time we get done leveraging what we all do and all the reading we're doing, we each got 200 hours a week of information running around our head, between the CPAs we talk to and the lawyers. So it's real hard to match 200 hours of information by saying, all right, Sunday, I'm going to go to church, I'm going to come home, and before the NFL game starts, I'm going to do my financial research. All right, so you spend 2 hours on that, and now you're done, right? Now you go back to the day the next week, your next morning, you're back to surgery again and operating on brains and all those other things, and you've got a little bit of information, but there's just no way to keep up. And it's easy to say, all right, you know what, I didn't get enough out of those 2 hours. I didn't research what John told me. So I think I'll just wait next Sunday after church. I'll do another hour's worth. And by then there's new information, right? So we want to be careful with that. As an example, there's tens of thousands of listed stocks around the world and even more mutual funds. And then every time you turn around, there's a report. Every morning I watch one of the financial shows, and there's somebody on rattling off 5 stocks that you should own, and they're different every day. So if I were to take the advice every day of either CNBC or Fox Business, I'm buying 10 new stocks a day. And then of course, what do I do Friday when 3 of those stocks are there's a different guy saying you shouldn't own those companies. So it's completely overwhelming, and we think we can boil it down to something more manageable with our process.
Yeah. And I think all the information being so available at our fingertips now, I don't know about everybody else, but every social media platform I've ever been on, there are so many people out there giving unsolicited advice with no personalization, just screaming, do what I did, do what I did, try this, do this. And none of them are licensed, none of them are professionals, and that's why they can be on all these social media platforms without any regulation. And every single one of them at the end will say this doesn't constitute financial advice, but really they're just loading you up with extra information that you didn't need, which adds to this analysis paralysis. So I think it's really easy to get extremely overwhelmed because we're in a state of the world where inflation is kind of running a bit rampant right now. Every single check feels like it spends less than the month before. So people feel like they're struggling to get by, and they feel like they need to really find that perfect solution, because if they don't find that perfect solution, they're going to be falling behind where they need to be. So I think it makes it more of a complex topic, and it makes things harder for people when you feel that extra pressure of, hey, the only way I could be successful is if I do the perfect thing right now. So
Good. And so ways to avoid that trap.
yeah, I think the first one is I typically say have trusted resources. That's part of the reason that we do what we do is we want to be those trusted resources for people. We want to go out and do our hours and hours of countless research on things, and it's interesting to us, and we want to help our clients be able to stay out of the weeds and be able to go do what they love, whether it's coaching their kids' soccer game or doing their profession or starting their own business. And we're the ones that get into the weeds and kind of limit the consumption and information that you guys really need to take in, and then come back to you with the best advice that we have. So that's where we come into play. We say, have a trusted resource. It doesn't need to be us. If you want it to be us, we're glad to help, but have some trusted resource that can help you filter in some of the information. I think the second step is setting a main objective. So ask what's most important to yourself and what you want the desired outcome to be, and then figure out what among the current options, which could include the current course, is the best. And then setting a deadline that when you would have to make a decision by then. So if you keep going in cycles of overanalyzing and you feel like you're getting overwhelmed, that deadline will help you say, hey, you know what, I'm getting overwhelmed, but like a decision should be made because I don't think my current course of action is better than one of these other course of action. So let's figure out which one's the best and kind of get down to the meat and potatoes of it. And then I think the next part and the final part that I would recommend is taking stepping stones. So avoiding trying to make the perfect decision. So weighing the current situation to one alternative and taking baby steps to get better each time. So I'm a huge Philadelphia Eagles fan. Not so great right now after the end of season collapse. I guess they really didn't live up to everything they were saying at the beginning of the season about, hey, everybody, like, let's get 1% better each day. But that is the thought process behind what we try to do. And Jalen Hurts tried to say it and say that we're going to try to get 1% better each day. Clearly didn't happen this season, but you guys can get 1% better each day. And we are glad to help you guys get 1% better each day and shrink the value of and the weight of a big decision that you feel like you have to make, and make it just a small decision, one step at a time.
Excellent. And then before I conclude, I'll throw in there, my old cockpit example. And, I look in the cockpit of the plane every time I come on and off the plane, and I wave to the, if it's Southwest, they're usually looking back and they'll wave or say hello. And I look at all those gauges and it's completely overwhelming. And I get to my seat and I say, you know what? I don't need to understand everything that's going on up there. I know some of it's the temperature of my suitcase underneath, and that's not that important to him getting us there safe and back. But I'm just grateful that they're there. And a lot of times in the paralysis analysis, we get the example of, I just don't understand that. And until I understand it to the nth degree, or Warren Buffett says if you don't completely understand it, you shouldn't do it. That's not true. I don't even know how my watch works. If I took this apart, when I was a kid, I took stuff apart. And I was fascinated by the guts of my transistor radios and my broken watches, but I said, wow, some genius put this together. Thank God, because I can't even put it back together. And I would move on. And I just accept that it works, and I trust the watchmaker and I trust the pilot. And if you're a paralysis analysis person, I would say find that trusted source, because you knew you needed to make a decision, and now you're putting it off for reasons that are not valid, in your confidence. So find someone you have confidence in to make that decision. If that right lawyer, that right doctor, get a second opinion from that doctor before you go under the knife, etc. Thanks again for watching another episode of Financial Tides. We look forward to helping those interested in making, their financial decisions in life, and making small decisions, big decisions. If somebody's important to you, that has a decision, just send them our way and we'll help them with that decision. Thanks for tuning in, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thanks for watching Financial Tides.
John Perillo and Taylor Perillo are financial advisors offering securities through Cetera Advisors LLC, a registered broker-dealer, doing insurance business in California as CFGA Insurance Agency LLC. Member FINRA/SIPC. Advisory services offered through Cetera Investment Advisors LLC, a registered investment advisor. Cetera firms are under separate ownerships from any other named entity. California insurance licenses number 0F60123 and 0M90666, 6265 Greenwich Drive, Suite 251, San Diego, California 92122. The views depicted in this material are for information purposes only and are not necessarily those of Cetera Advisors LLC. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Neither Cetera Advisors LLC nor any of its representatives may give legal or tax advice.